Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Chavez and Valko's end of the week wrap up. Your favorite attorneys, Nick and Martin. Nick Chavez is coming to you from our Fort Worth office, and I'm in our Dallas office. As we did last week, we wanted to do a quick rundown of the most important items that happened this week and also answer any questions that you may have. So please ask your questions at any time, and then we'll be happy to answer it. Also, please like or subscribe to our page or share it with your friends so they can also follow us. And in the comments, you will see links. You will find links where you can register for and download Lawpilot Guardian app, which is something that Nick and I co-founded and developed, and we use it to notify our clients about breaking news, to give them access to Know Your Rights database, and of course, to let us know if they ever find themselves in an emergency, where we're able to find them through GPS on a map, and we're able to listen in to see if they need our assistance. So, Nick, welcome. How's it going in Fort Worth?
Good. And talking about that app, I got a call from a client who pressed that red button, but she had just been in a car accident. So it wasn't an immigration. I still answered it. We still went over the things that you need to do to present to your insurance company. So it was very interesting. But she was quite surprised that we picked up and we responded. And that tells you about how responsive we are.
I did not know you're moonlighting as an insurance agent. So, but that's good. No,
it's good money.
Yeah, we both, Nick and I, are on the response team along with our calling center, and so when our clients hear from us at 2 o'clock in the morning, if something happens, they're truly surprised, and we try to do it. We try to respond because this is something that we deeply care about and care for our clients. So I'm just gonna bring up the topics that you'd like to discuss, and then we'll just do some questions and answers, and then see if there will be any questions from our audience. Again, this is something also good to listen to or watch later on, so you can share it with your friends and family. But a couple of things. So we'll talk about consular processing and updates. And this is for, generally speaking, immigrant visa applicants in their home countries when they're trying to apply for their immigrant visas. We'll talk about the update on the medical exam, and that's the waiver of the 60-day deadline that is imposed by the USCIS for adjustment of status. We'll update you on the Build Back Better, on the bill that is currently before the Senate parliamentarian deciding if the immigration provision could be in the final bill, or at least in the Senate's version. So currently it's undergoing what's called a bird bath to see if it can stay there. And, we've been refreshing that page every 5 minutes to see if there are any updates. And we'll talk about the Afghan parolees and the process, and what is the current status of that program. We'll talk about the travel restrictions. Again, we brought it up last Friday, and so just want to make sure that you're aware of the travel requirements and restrictions when you're coming in through the border or flying in through the U.S. airport. And then we'll wrap it up. Nick, what's the new on the consular processing front? There have been a couple of updates recently, and so what's important to bring up for our audience?
Well, there is a recent update, as recent as today, regarding the consular processing, and that means for individuals who have to go to the U.S. consulate to apply for their immigrant visa. And green card is another word they use. And some individuals are already here, but they don't qualify to get their green card here in the United States. They have to leave outside through this process, consular processing, hence consulate. And it's been quite a journey, to say the least. Since COVID, things have been backed up. And we got a bit of good news this morning. Department of State announced that if for certain individuals, or certain immigrant visa applicants who are applying for their visa and they're waiting to get an interview, that's part of the process. They're going to go ahead and skip that process, the interview process, which is great. It's just great. It would cut down on some of the lengthy processing times that we're seeing. But they did specify that this new policy where you can skip the interview for an immigrant visa only applies to a few individuals who were already approved for an immigrant visa. They call them repeat immigrant visa applicants, meaning they already had the interview and they're applying based on the same category. We see that sometimes when a person shows up to the interview and the consular officer has questions, or they ask them to apply for a waiver, or they put them in what's called administrative processing. And rather than, when all that has cleared up, rather than bringing them back and for another interview, which is could add more time to the process, they are just going to go ahead and skip that. So it you might hear about it. It might ring, really great for you, especially if you have if you're waiting for your interview. But it only applies to a small amount of people. But I think it's a good sign, because we've been hearing individuals, we've been hearing discussions, organizations, groups that get together, and there were some questions and answers, meetings with department officials about, why don't we just skip the interview process for cases that are pretty obvious, meaning that everything's been established. The parent has established relationship with the child. There are no questions. They already run. They had already ran background checks. So there's no security threats. Why don't we skip that process? So they're at least looking at that option, or at the very least, I think we might see remote interviews, which would be great.
What have you seen in terms of the biggest challenges at the consulates right now that we're hearing from our clients?
Numero uno, always lengthy processing times. We're talking about since what happens is, after the petition's approved, just to give you a little background, then the case is transferred over to the Department of State. And you might get some correspondence from the National Visa Center, which is an agency that operates under the State Department. And they are in charge of coordinating the interviews. And screening the documents, screening the application, obtaining the application, making sure that everything is in order before they pass it over to the consulate. So once everything is in order, once they've received the application information, once they've received the documentation for it, they deem that that case at that point is documentarily qualified. So it's qualified in terms of document. They have all the ducks in a row and everything like that, and they're just waiting for an interview. Well, pre-COVID, we would see that when everything was screened out and they had put all the information was there in the file and it was ready to go. From that point to getting the interview at the consulate, it varies, but I would say on average, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 months. But now we're seeing processing times. Again, it varies by consulate. It's go beyond that time frame. So we're looking at 5 months upward to a year. And so that is the number one challenge we're seeing is that it's taking a long time to get the interview, even though the applicant has already submitted their documents.
Yeah, and I also like to point out that there's a difference between different posts across the world. So, some countries or U.S. consulates in some countries could process faster than others. I think the one that is really bogged down and it takes probably the longest is the U.S. consulate in Ciudad Juarez in Mexico, which is the largest consulate that processes immigrant visas, and they have just enormous operations. But still, getting the visa down and then just the processing of it. The processing goes fairly quickly, but just getting it from the National Visa Center plays big difference. And also another comment I wanted to throw in, there are some exceptions, obviously, but there's been some cases that we recently had where we ask if there is a possibility of local processing. So when you have somebody who marries and wants to sponsor them for immigrant visa for a green card, it takes generally, if you are stateside and you take the petition, and that takes anywhere between, want to say, 4 or 5 to 12 months, and then the immigrant visa application, if there's no need for the waiver, could take up another year. And so sometimes you're looking at 2 years, and couples are just frustrated, thinking, well, that's my spouse. Why can't I bring him back right away? And so there are certain exceptions that allow for local processing, and what that means is that the consulate will receive the petition that basically solidifies the relationship, that confirms it, and the immigrant visa application. And so we've had recently one from Honduras, I believe, where the entire process was done in about 45 days, which is just incredible. And I think that's how it should be anytime you're trying to bring in your spouse. So you are not separated, and then potentially you could be questioned about the validity of the relationship if one is in the U.S. for a couple of years and the other one is over there. So it should go fairly quickly, but not everything goes quickly, unfortunately, in this immigration process. So just wanted to throw it in there. All right, let's move to the waiver of the 60-day deadline for the medical exams when somebody's applying for adjustment of status, or in other words, green card. What's the news there?
Yeah, that's another positive development, and also in response to the lengthy processing times due to COVID. And so this is a smart move, and this means that. And just to back up a little bit, the medical examination is a requirement. USCIS, the federal government, requires that an immigrant visa applicant provide a medical examination by an authorized doctor. Mm-hmm. And they're pretty much certifying that the person has no communicable diseases, because that is a basis for denial. They're looking at sexually transmitted diseases, tuberculosis, or at least certain types. And along with that, there are also vaccination requirements with that. But anyways, the doctor makes sure that everything's functioning and that you're not going to bring any diseases, and they certify that, they sign it, right? So USCIS, which is the agency that processes the applications here in the United States, they were requiring that signature, right? That you file your application within 60 days of the doctor signing. Now, the problem is that sometimes things could be delayed. Sometimes doctors are busy, mm-hmm. and they don't even issue. They issue it several weeks after the examination, or something comes up. And then if it's beyond 60 days and you want to file it, you typically would have to refile it. But with this new policy, you don't have to do that anymore. If it's beyond the 60 days, when you have the application, you're ready to file it, you can still file it, which is great. Also, a reminder about medical examinations. Also a positive development, and also in response to the COVID pandemic, is that in August, USCIS extended the validity of that medical exam from 2 years to 4 years. So this means that when you apply for your green card and you have the medical examination, that certification is going to be valid for 4 years. Before, the applicant had to, if it had expired beyond 2 years, the applicant at that point had to go to the doctor again and get the medical examination, which was a waste of time. This new policy is effective until September 30th, 2022. So it's about a year long.
Okay. Now, lots of questions and a lot of pushback from some of the clients that we see or consult with, and that is the vaccination for COVID-19 in relation to the medical exam, right? And a lot of people thought it's voluntary, and there's been a pretty big update, a few months ago, or actually October, a couple of months ago. What is that about?
Well, yeah, so with the increases in infections of COVID, USCIS decided, along with this travel restrictions, to go ahead and require the applicants for immigrant visas, both here and outside, that they, along with their medical examination, show evidence that they have been vaccinated. And I'm talking about a full vaccination. I'm not talking about a half vaccination, because some vaccinations require 2 shots, right? 2 jabs, as they say. And so you have to have those 2 shots already done, present that to the authorized doctor, which, by the way, have a civil surgeon. That's what they're called here, an authorized physician, to do the medical examination. And outside it's called panel physician. So they have different terms for it, but same thing. You submit that evidence. You show the doctor the evidence that you got your shot, and you got your shots. If we're talking about Pfizer or Moderna, and then they'll go ahead and certify and execute the examination record for you. Now, the pushback is primarily with clients or applicants who don't want to get vaccinated, and that's understandable. There are some exceptions to that. If you fall under one of these exceptions, you don't have to get vaccination. One of them is if you are not required, if it's something that is children. Certain children are not. It's not advisable right now, or hasn't been endorsed by the FDA and the CDC to give shots to certain children. If you have a medical issue, they call it a contraindication, where it's not medically appropriate to get a shot, that you could fall under an exception. You don't have to get a vaccination. There is also, if you are, but we haven't seen this. This is pretty rare. If there is a shortage in vaccinations, if you are in an area where it's not practical to get it, or it's unavailable, you don't have to get vaccination. But the more common issue that we're seeing with respect to those who are seeking some sort of exception are the ones that just don't want to get a shot. And there is an exception for religious and moral convictions, meaning if you have a religious conviction that prevents you from getting a shot, or a moral conviction, then you can submit what's called the waiver to get that, for them to waive the requirement for a vaccination. Now, you have to also show that this conviction is profound, and that you have this this belief, and you've always had this, in the sense that you are against all vaccinations, not just COVID. Okay, so you have to show that you have this hard belief that you shouldn't get your vaccination based on these religious or moral grounds. But you have the responsibility. The applicant has the responsibility to show that, whether it be a letter from your religious leader or some other evidence that shows that you've had this belief.
One thing I just wanted to throw in, and this is for also for people, we mentioned consular processing earlier, and we're talking about medical exam. Often we see people travel down to their home country. They haven't seen their friends for a long time. They go out, they party. They may, I mean, typically, getting drunk or drinking is not a big issue unless there are DWIs and things, and that's a totally different topic where they have to seek guidance from the panel physician, and typically they would sideline them for 6 months to a year, where they have to come back. We've had some cases where somebody did some type of a soft drug like marijuana, and that came up on the medical test, and that also sidelined that person. So very important, to be very cautious and careful about doing something like that, at the spur of the moment after seeing somebody after many years. When you return. The next topic, Build Back Better, update on it. We talked about it last Friday, and again, we've been checking, and no updates. Really, what it is, the Congress, the House of Representatives had passed the BBB, the Triple B bill, and now it's before the Senate, and the Senate is considering the bill under the reconciliation or the budget process, and so there are very tough restrictions in that process, and a person in charge of deciding of what can go into the bill is the Senate parliamentarian. It's an unelected position. It's an appointed position, and that's the person who's really deciding what can and cannot be, and it has to have some type of a budgetary effect on the bill, but the effects cannot be just merely incidental to what they're trying to accomplish. And so the two attempts, the Plan A and Plan B, that were proposed by the Democratic leaders have already been struck down by the Senate parliamentarian. The Plan C, which would allow for about 7 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. currently to stay and apply for a parole, which they would allow them to stay here and work here, have a work authorization for 10 years. So the approval will be for 10 years, and this is something very important. It would include people that were physically present in the U.S. prior to January 1st, 2011, so have at least 10 years of physical presence. So that's the deciding date. That could, of course, change if it's allowed, and there will be some negotiations in the conference between the House and the Senate. So always these are just proposals, and then the final text, the copy of the bill will this is something that would be negotiated. But again, we're still waiting for the Senate parliamentarian to decide whether or not that Plan C would be allowed in that bill. Anything else you wanted to add, Nick, here?
Yeah, if the parliamentarian decides not to go with the Democrats' plan or Plan C, that could always be overridden. It's a Senate position. It's more of an advisory position. That position is there because, as we mentioned before, there are certain proposals, certain laws that could be passed with a simple majority, as long as they have some impact on the budget, as you mentioned earlier. But if it'd be interesting, and I'm just checking right now my Twitter, and nothing yet, but you can see the politics already. Where you have one of the senators, Manchin, who says that if this is going to stick with the parliamentarian, whatever the decision, good or bad. So there's a lot of politics behind this, and it's very interesting. But this if it passes, it would have a very good impact on individuals. It's not green card. It's not what we want, but it's something. It's a step to the right, in the right direction. And as I say this, my light also goes off. But I think that it's annoying. Let me just go ahead and do a little tap dance here. All right. But yeah, but I think that you have certain individuals who are going to get this parole. And what is parole? Parole is basically an immigration benefit that gives you some relief from deportation, at the same time gives you work authorization and travel based on a urgent humanitarian need, or if it's in the public interest, right? And these individuals will get it here. If you really want to get into the weeds, it's called parole in place, to be specific. But and so that would benefit those individuals. But there's another group of people that having parole would lead to a green card, would lead to lawful permanent resident status, and later down the road U.S. citizenship. And I'm talking about individuals who are currently eligible to apply for a green card now, but can't do it here in the United States through the process called adjustment of status. They have to go through the process that we referred to at the beginning, the consular processing, consulate, because they have to go through the U.S. consulate and get that interview. The problem is that they're already here. They have to go outside. And if they have to go outside, the law in most cases will require that the applicant apply for a waiver, right? And it gets messy. And we see how things are going, how slow things are turning out right now at the consulate and everywhere else. So it would be a great thing if they are allowed to apply here. And the parole would, in a way, be a magic wand that says, you have this parole document now, if we grant it to you. This parole document would then allow them to apply for a green card here. Because to apply for a green card here, and then we'll do a show on just this part, adjustment of status, the general requirement to get a green card here through a family member, and there are other requirements, is to show that the person has been admitted or paroled in. Fancy word for, we're going to let you in for a certain purpose, and you know, provide us your evidence of your entry permit, and we're going to go ahead and inspect you. That action will satisfy the requirement to apply for a green card here. The problem is that most people, well, some people don't have that. They entered without inspection, and so they have to go outside. And so this would solve that problem, where if you're currently here, you have an application, you have a petition already approved, maybe through a spouse, but your lawyers or people are saying you can't get your green card here, you have to go outside and apply for that waiver and all that. Well, guess what? If they give you the parole, the magic wand, right? Now you have some proof, an entry permit, so to speak, that is magically applied, and will then allow you. It's complex. I simplified it, but there is that potential benefit to what estimated 7 million undocumented individuals that would benefit from this legislative measure.
Yeah. And that's the thing, though. I mean, there's a trifecta, right? You have the House, you have the Senate, you have the White House, Senate at 50-50, but still with the vice president who's breaking the tie.
Yeah.
But really, nothing gets past the filibuster, which is the 60 vote majority, which in these type of sticky topics, it doesn't really garner much of the opposite vote. And so reconciliation is it comes up a couple of times a year, and that's why it's just so closely watched. And Senate the representative Ocasio-Cortez had publicly called for the Senate to overrule the parliamentarian, even to fire her. And like you mentioned, Senator Manchin, who is a Democrat from West Virginia, I believe, it's kind of a middle of a field guy, and he basically indicated that he would not be for overruling the parliamentarian. So shifting gears a bit, Nick, but still on the topic of parole, what's the update on the Afghan parole program? And this whole thing came up with or the following the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan earlier or a few months ago, and so tens and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people were displaced, and the a parole for Afghani was established by the USCIS, and the Department of State as well, but primarily the request is to the immigration agency to allow them to be paroled into the U.S. so they can come into the U.S. and have work permit and be safe and sound here. What's the news there?
Yeah, well, not so much of an update, but a trend that we're seeing, and this is a bad trend where, and we hope that it doesn't continue. We hope that there's just isolated reports, but I doubt it. So individuals, as you mentioned, nationals from Afghanistan are eligible to apply for parole, and we talked about parole in the context of immigration reform. But this parole is the same type of thing, but you're outside the country. And so you're applying to come in based on a humanitarian reason. And this is a humanitarian reason. As you mentioned, there are hundreds of thousands of people displaced. There was really no order in bringing them back. So parole was an option that the government had to try to get these nationals out of harm's way. Now, parole generally is a temporary thing, and you've seen parole in these types of circumstances. You've seen it before, and this is something that is you could apply if you meet certain criteria. So that criteria is you have to file an application. Now, if the person's outside and you have somebody here in the United States that wants to apply or put on their behalf, you can, and you do it on this form I-131. You submit a photocopy of their identification, the applicant's application, and describe why you need to come in for parole. You also need to show some evidence here, if you have any. You have to state why they cannot apply for refugee status, or why cannot they just get a U.S. visa. So those are some of the basic requirements. There was a report that indicated that by mid-November last month, out of 28,000 applications that were submitted to USCIS from abroad, only 100 applications have been approved. So already there, you kind of have a bad, sense of it. But recently, we've been hearing from colleagues and reports that there's been more denials. And these denials are basically coming from USCIS, and they are requiring that the applicant show that they are a target or that they have suffered individualized harm, which is hard to show. Essentially, they're asking them to prove an asylum case when we're not proving an asylum case. We're just proving that, in general, this person, being an Afghani national, is in harm's way, and because of the Taliban. There's no requirement that you show that you're specifically targeted. There is, or there could be, if you're applying for asylum. So it's creating, or USCIS, hopefully we see this trend end, but it seems like they're creating this unreachable requirement for many, because they don't have evidence of that. They don't, how do you get that? So we hope that this is just a short-lived trend.
They're supposed to be hands on deck, because we've known that there are some personnel from the local field offices, especially from Dallas, high up people were detailed to this program, and so 100 people approved from abroad is quite low a number. And I get it, right? There's just security and background checks and so many different things that they have to go through. So they vet the folks properly, especially if they are the ones that were assisting our troops and our contractors, or they are their immediate relatives or family members. So
yeah,
it's a tough thing. So hopefully that will speed up. But we've, like you said, we've heard of some denials from some colleagues, and that's pretty concerning. All right, let's move to the topic of the travel restrictions as they relate to the various variants of the coronavirus. Just an update if there's anything everybody's wondering, and we get emails and calls about travel and what they need to know when they're coming back.
Yeah, so there was a lot of buzz last week due to the Omicron variant, and as a result, you see the government, the federal government, put these restrictions when 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, they had lifted the restrictions. Now they're tightening the restrictions back, which kind of, it tells you how unpredictable viruses and pandemics could be, right? So they can travel easily, and so they're trying to restrict travel. The thought process there is to have to try to lessen the infection rates by doing that. We'll see, but the travel restrictions are as follows. If you're, and there's two parts of it. There's the international travel, and there's travel through the border. And I did a video on this, which is now kind of outdated, which tells you how you need to be on top of the news. So the international travel basically requires that all visitors must be vaccinated. Now, there are exceptions: U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, children under 18, and there are a few other exceptions. But there is an additional requirement that's very important, that all whether you're vaccinated or not, all applicants, whether you're a U.S. citizen or not, must test for COVID before boarding a plane. And for those who were vaccinated, sad to say that you had a 3-day window before, but as part of the new restrictions that came out, they shortened it to 1 day. So everyone, in other words, has to show that they've been tested for COVID. They have to provide a negative COVID test within 1 day before boarding. Children under 2 years of age they don't have to do that. The other part of it is the border, right? You have people coming in and out from Canada, Mexico, especially during the holidays. They want to come for shopping and visit family, whatnot. And they have it a little bit different. They're still requiring vaccination, proof of vaccination for all visitors. There are exceptions for those who are U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents. But now it doesn't matter if you're coming in to visit for an essential reason or just coming here to shop. They did away with that restriction. You only have to show that you have been vaccinated. There's no testing required for now, just like international travel. And there is supposed to be some development happening with respect to this requirement in January. So we're waiting to see what happens. Supposedly, they're going to require that all visitors, essential or non-essential visitors, show proof of vaccination. So they're not going to have they're going to restrict or narrow down the exceptions, but that remains to be seen. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's about does it for this week's end of the week wrap up. Tune in. I'm not sure if we're going to be on next week. We might be, and then we'll let you know the schedule that would follow. As our followers knows, we do these Facebook Lives in both English and Spanish. So just watch out for the Spanish show. Watch out for the business and employment immigration show. We try to bring and bring the latest to you guys and also to educate you. And so, to keep in the know, like or subscribe to the page or other social media platforms we're on. Of course, Lawpilot GUARDIAN app that Nick and I developed. Again, this is just a fantastic thing to have in your pocket. Some people call it a lawyer in the pocket. In Nick's case, it might be an insurance agent in your pocket. But it's the news, it's the knowledge, it's pre-recorded statements when dealing with law enforcement officers, so you don't have to talk to them if you don't want to or if you don't speak English, and also letting us know if you're in trouble. So very, very useful. I also would like to bring to your attention is we have a toy drive where we exchange toys, 2 toys in the amount of $40, new unwrapped toys in exchange for a consultation for a family or a deportation based consultation. At the end of next week, I believe we will put them all together, and then we'll play Santas. We'll go to a couple of centers, a couple of nonprofits, and we'll try to make the lives of some children better. And this is something we've done for several years, and this is important to us. And so it's basically as much as we can do to contribute to the community. So when you tune in next, you may see Nick tap dance. Maybe he'll do something else for us to keep the light on in his office.
You only know if you tune in.
That's right. And I would like to give a shout out to Joe Lopez, our audio, video, graphic design, marketing guy. So Joe makes the show shows go every week. But anyways, happy the rest of the week. Enjoy the weekend and tune in next time. See you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.